All right, so I got some heat for the real talk topic today because many of our students would say that they think there's only two genders. So they say to Adam, Adam, why are you bringing this topic up to us? We all know that there's two genders, male and female. And so they would go on to talk about, especially for our ice-breaking kids, they went out and talked about how obviously we know from the physiological characteristics of males and females that there's two of them. We know that chromosomally, we have XY chromosomes and XX chromosomes. So there's ways that we can define that there's only two genders, and they wanted to just mic drop themselves out of there and just be like, boom, it's over. So I said to the students, I said, well, since most of you guys agree that there's only two genders, even though I think that they're wrong in what they said as their reasoning why there's only two genders, more on that coming up. But I say, since most of us agree, let's work on a proper dialogue. I think that when these kids go to high school and they go to college, they're going to encounter people that would disagree with them that there's two genders. This is obviously a thing in America. We hear about it all the time. They're going to disagree. I said, okay, let's imagine that we're going to disagree, because many times when we talk about this, we can come at it from a hostile or a degrading standpoint, where we can come at somebody and make fun of it. It's some things that really bother me, and I've said these things. I'll say to the kids sometimes, well, there's three genders, male, female, and attack helicopter. It's a thing the kids say. That's degrading. That doesn't help anyone to have a conversation. Or when someone would say, like, LGBTQ, LMNOP. That's also degrading. So that doesn't help you with the dialogue that you're trying to have. That doesn't help you in your conversation. And some kids say, well, like, who cares? If they don't want to handle it, that's their problem. Well, I say, no, that's the wrong way of thinking, because you can win an argument with somebody, but lose their soul. Like, your idea, the reason that you're sharing this is because you care about somebody. You care about somebody's life, and you're sharing something that this is harmful for your life, or there's something that you're not seeing in this situation that can be helpful to you. Let me help you out with this. It's not where you're trying to just win arguments, because you can win arguments, but lose souls. And, Ben Shapiro's famous for saying, my facts don't care about your feelings. And while there may be truth to that facts are sometimes very sterile and can cut deep or whatever, there are still things like feelings. If you're not going to win someone's soul over by not caring about their feelings. So trying to get that across to our students, that when we have these conversations about controversial topics, that we have to have a caring heart. The goal can't be just winning arguments, but it has to be about caring about the individual. So I told the students, I see what you're saying when you talk about male and female, the physiological makeup that we have. But if you go with that approach to somebody and you're trying to have a dialogue or a debate or a discussion or an argument or wherever you find yourself in, and you bring that perspective, you're talking right past the other person. Because they can see that too. And when they talk about sex and gender, they don't always mean what you mean when you say sex and gender. Sometimes we think about it, people that would agree that there's only two genders or two sexes, we think they're the same thing. Other folks would disagree. And they would say, okay, my sex may be how my body looks, but my gender is how I feel, which can change. I can feel differently on different days. My sex can't always change, so therefore my sex might be more static. So I give some examples of these, and I think that we see it in the church too when it comes to like our spiritual, like our soul and our body. Like, we're a spiritual and physical being. So our soul is different from our body, but we have both of them. Faith and works is an example. Faith might be something that I that I believe in, but my works are something that I do. We've had debates in the church about those things, and the Catholic Church always seems to take a both and approach, where it's faith and works. I am soul and body. Like, my gender, the way I feel about myself, cannot be separated. It should be in alignment with how my body looks. If I'm a man, my masculine gender should reflect my male body. There shouldn't be a disunity there. It should be the same. So trying to encourage the students to think about that, and they're like, well, it doesn't make any sense. You should feel the same. So I said, okay, what about this? Has there ever been a time in your life where maybe you've stolen something, and you were guilty of stealing something, true, but you didn't feel that you were guilty. You weren't sorry about it. You did something bad, but you weren't sorry about it. Or there's other kids, for example, who didn't do anything bad, but they still feel guilty. That happens all the time. You see it from both angles. Maybe the good kid in class or the bad kid in class. This one's overly remorseful. This one's not remorseful enough. Or when we see it, when it comes to, some of these examples were a little bit more visual. When you have somebody who's anorexic, and so they don't eat a lot of food, but when they look in the mirror, they see themselves as fat. Okay, their body looks like one thing, but in their mind, in their spirit, in their soul, they see something totally different. When it comes to some of our bodybuilders that you see, they're huge dudes. They see themselves as being skinny. When obviously everybody who's an average person is like, dude, you're huge. But inside themselves, they're driven to continue to work out because they don't feel big enough. They don't feel masculine enough, or muscular enough. So sometimes what's happening in our soul doesn't match up with what our body looks like. I think some more got it, but still some didn't see. They don't see. They see it that as being a mistake. And I think that they're right. You know, that it should line up, but the reality is we live in a fallen world. There are many things that I think in my body that are disordered, like that I have disorders when it comes to me. I was born in this way. There's no doubt. I was born with original sin. I have concupiscence. Like, I don't always think rightly. My soul doesn't always line up with my body. Like, I don't always do the right thing. The flesh is weak. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Sometimes I know what's right in my body, but my body wants to do something different. So I hope that resonated with them. And really the mindset of when we're dialoguing with someone, sometimes we talk right past them and we don't mean what they mean. And I encourage them to think about it in these ways where it's not just like binary. Some people are thinking different than you think. We watched a video online about a guy who identified as a 6'5" Chinese woman, and they kind of laughed at it. But the reality is, like, that's kind of where this is kind of where things are going. Okay, maybe it starts with I identify as a woman compared to a man that I actually am. But then what if I change the identity of my age? Maybe I'm a 7-year-old. Does that change anything? Like, would you agree with that? The guy said, maybe I'm a Chinese woman. Does that change or a Chinese person? He said, maybe I'm 6'5" tall. Well, obviously I'm not. So how far does this go? This kind of thinking, like, it starts out as something maybe innocent. Like, this person feels like a girl. Maybe that's not so bad, but how far are we willing to let it go before we stand up and say, no, that's not true? Some kid said, well, I could bring out a ruler and show you that you're not really 6'5" tall. You're 5'9" tall. Okay, that's a great example. Where we can say that there's something not lining up here. The reality in our culture is, instead of looking at it from that perspective, there's something that's missing in how someone feels. There's something that's wrong there. We look at it and try to patch it with a physical change, and the transgender changes. Johns Hopkins University used to perform sex reassignment surgeries in the 60s, but then when they saw that it wasn't having the desired effects, it wasn't solving the problem, they stopped doing it because it wasn't solving the problem. They were making physiological changes for an emotional or a spiritual or some kind of internal emotional, some kind of problem inside somebody that didn't line up. It wasn't that their body was wrong. There was just something else. But nobody wants to hear that these days. Nobody wants to hear that someone's spirit isn't lining up with their body. So I was able to tell the kids, I think it's important to sometimes we can get caught up in these political things, but trying to wrap it around to, okay, how does this, as we as Catholics, how does this make sense towards the gospel message? And obviously with the two parts, we are spirit and body. We are soul and body. And the ideal is that those line up, but they don't always line up. And there is fallenness in this world where those things don't match up and it is off. That's true. But also that we shouldn't identify ourselves by our sexuality. We shouldn't identify ourselves by any of these things that we have. I said whether it's your sexuality, your gender, your athletic ability, your looks, your smarts, whatever it is, you shouldn't identify as that. You should identify as a beloved child of God. And that's something that nobody can take from you. You can't lose it. It just is. It's a constant. So therefore, if something bad happens in your life where one of these things goes away, you're not devastated because that thing that you identified with most isn't gone. If you identify with being a child of God more than anything else, that never leaves and always stays. No matter how you behave, no matter who you are, no matter what changes in your life, that's always there. And that's the number one, hopefully, number one takeaway that I gave these students is that we should be identifying as beloved children of God, no matter who we are or where we find ourselves. It was an interesting conversation. It was kind of different than, like, everyone seemed to agree. However, I told them this. I said, my first year here, my second year here, there was someone who graduated from 8th grade and immediately in 9th grade identified as pansexual non-binary. So to think that everybody in my class thinks that the same way I do, and I'm going to talk about it as if we do, and people that don't talk like that are stupid, like, you could be talking about someone in your class right now who disagrees with you. And to be aware of that some of these things that you might say are offending that person, whether you think they should be offended or not, are offending that person, and you should care about that person. And that they may look at you as an idiot right now because you're talking like a dork. So be careful what you say because you don't know how everybody else feels. And this goes for Adam too, because Adam talks all the time.